Hey y'all, hey y'all, hey y'all, welcome and welcome back. However this finds you, I hope that this finds you well. Tonight, I will be giving a live commentary of the highly anticipated 2024 presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. What I will be doing is giving my perspective through the lens of a brand marketer with over 20 years of experience. What I will not be doing is giving a political point of view. I am not a political wonk, and that is not what this channel is about. This channel is about personal branding, marketing, community, and a whole bunch of other great stuff in between. On this historic night, I am going to be sharing the strengths, weaknesses that I witness from these two candidates in what is one of the most important elections of my lifetime, of your lifetime. So, are you ready? Great. Let's do it.
Thank you for joining us for tonight's ABC News presidential debate. We want to welcome viewers watching on ABC and around the world tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump are just moments away from taking the stage in this unprecedented race for president. And I'm Linsey Davis. Tonight's meeting could be the most consequential event of their campaigns, with Election Day now less than 2 months away. For Vice President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st. Of course, that decision followed his debate against President Donald Trump in June. Since then, this race has taken on an entirely new dynamic. And that brings us to the rules of tonight's debate. 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. No topics or questions have been shared with the campaigns. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and this is the clock. That's what they'll be seeing. 2 minutes for rebuttals and 1 minute for follow-ups.
So it is big enough for all of us to see.
Will only be turned on when it's their turn to speak. No pre-written notes allowed. There is no audience here tonight in this hall at the National Constitution Center. This is an intimate setting for 2 candidates.
Excellent wardrobe choice by Linsey, the gray on gray, and David. Excellent choice. We love the tie, the navy blue and light blue combination. Vice President Harris stepping in here, signature dark suit. She stepped in, leaned in, greeting former President Trump. This is the first time that they are meeting in person. You notice here that Kamala Harris seems excited, refreshed, invigorated. And Donald Trump's signature Donald Trump, everything tip to toe.
Often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid.
We're starting out with the story of Americana, a family, which they have been leaning heavily into since day one of this campaign. The American dream.
That's why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing. And the cost of housing is
so strong start from the very beginning, the relatability.
Need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is
and the plan forward.
Child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me.
We're going into the familial story, which has been built up for us over the past month and a half. My plan. So this is on brand for her.
His plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5
So this is the contrast that she is setting up here.
That I call the Trump sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of
You'll
dollars.
notice here he is subdued to start.
Because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that,
So we're leaning into signature Donald Trump, which is millions, billions. And you'll notice here he shifted to the issue.
African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions.
We're back on black jobs.
And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio.
And let's see the response here. All signature Donald Trump.
They're taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people.
Fear, violence, tropes being lifted here. A bit of a whistle. On brand, but I would say it's an interesting choice here.
In the history of our country, I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health.
So here we are leaning into a reminder.
Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy.
And the comparison and contrast.
And what we have done
This is very signature to her debate style.
To do is build on what we know are the aspirations and
And
the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you,
hopes and dreams.
you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances.
She's setting the stage for his personal brand
Tonight is a detailed
and what we can expect.
plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us, and I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas. I guess some.
Notice her body language here with the eye squint.
Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially.
When he does speak, she is looking at him directly. This is part of her style, period. And it is very different from the style of Joe Biden, who, during the last debate, did not look at his opponent much, to be honest.
We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounced back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So, Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy. And the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy.
So she is referring to the stamps and
16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would
the receipts, if you will, and that is powerful. We all know that advocacy that comes from another space and place, social proof, can be more powerful than anything else.
Because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
It's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say, look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences.
This is signature Donald Trump.
She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do
bringing forward a joke there,
the Vice President
dumbing down.
You responded, and let's drill down on this because
signature
your plan
Trump
is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say
this is
a
point of contention. This argument here. Let's see how it is addressed.
Arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were
the billions of billions, and the reining in or the control of China is on brand for former President Trump.
Billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything.
Relatability
The
there.
people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize.
So you see here when she's mentioning what he did, she's kind of giving us a lens, right? A peek under the hood, and then the looking at him to address him as she's saying it. And it is quite powerful. It's kind of like saying to your friend or whoever, your adversary, did you not say X, Y, and Z? Because I remember you said that. And it's a powerful tactic and very much on brand for her.
On the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that
So
she
again,
is
the
responsible
receipts
for
here.
tracking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump will let me respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because
The
of
Taiwan, the saying there, the way he said it is on brand.
Damn, I would say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well.
So the smiling, the leaning in, is that so? Is that what happened? That is on brand. And actually, it's a very Libra-like thing to do.
21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals.
I wonder
And
what
that's
is being
bad for
written.
our economy too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump. Thanks. Linsey.
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights.
I love the gray that Linsey is giving in the pinstripes, y'all. From her earrings to the shirt, the jacket, everything together. And it seems to be like a warmish, at least the way I'm seeing it here, a warmish gray.
Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, is doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month.
So that he's really out of it.
He also says
Signature
after birth,
Donald Trump, that
execution,
poking.
no longer abortion because the baby is born is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years they've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican.
So speaking with vigor, authority,
and that's what happened. Now, Ohio,
it leaves very little room for questioning of what exactly is being said. Because the way what he is being said, what he is saying rather, is presented.
Great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to it.
I'll give that to Linsey for correcting there. That is vintage journalism. Vintage. Because these days that doesn't happen much. But shout out to her for doing that in real time.
Exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government and Donald Trump certainly should not be telling a woman.
So you see here, she is leaning into this issue.
You want to talk about this is what people want?
As a woman,
Pregnant women who
this is
want to carry
effective
a pregnancy
because this is something that
suffering
he
from a miscarriage,
cannot, at
denied
least
care
where he
in
stands now,
emergency
he
rooms.
cannot
They help
speak
their
on this,
partners are afraid they might go
at least with this
and she's
amount of
bleeding out
passion
the
and
parking lot.
vigor,
She didn't want that.
unless it is
Her husband didn't want
rooted
that.
in
12 or 13
mistruths,
survivors
as we started out with
being forced
in this
to carry
particular
pregnancy
line
to
of
term.
questioning.
They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in
So
the
this
states. And I think
division
something that
being
nobody thought was
lifted.
possible.
Signature
The
Donald
states
Trump.
are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came
Well, I
to your
won't
desk?
have to because, again, and two things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50, essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of when they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look,
This is an
her boss
interesting
went out
choice.
and said, "We'll do
Her
it again.
boss.
We'll do it a different way." And he went out, got
On
rejected again by
brand,
the Supreme Court.
110%.
So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea. And how unfair that would have been, part of the reason they lost, to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free. But they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. in all fairness.
Linsey's face.
And I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look,
This is on brand. So he's left his VP pick to fend
just like she couldn't get
for
student loans,
himself.
she couldn't get student loans,
That's him over there.
taunted young
That is very much on
people,
brand
a lot of
for
people
President
that had
Trump.
loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. So wonderful, let's go to Congress, do it. But the fact is that for years they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government, and we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade, and as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking
His
for
expression
an
here is
abortion.
interesting.
That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working one or two jobs who can barely afford childcare as it is have to travel to another state to get on
So
a plane
again,
sitting next to strangers,
leaning
to go and get
into,
the
I know
healthcare
what
she
this is
needs.
like. I know what
Barely
this is
can afford to
like.
do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable.
And that's an
And the people
advantage.
of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris.
Excuse me, I have to-
Freedom,
another lie.
lifting.
I've
Oh,
been a leader on IVF.
that look was
which is
interesting.
fertilization. The IVF.
Another lie. Is that so?
In fact,
On
we
brand.
got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts. I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month? Okay, would you do that?
So you notice he can't even look at her. That is signature Donald Trump.
You could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's not
month,
true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the former
After
governor of
birth.
Virginia. The governor of
Abortion
Virginia
after
said,
birth?
"Put the baby aside, and then we determine what we want to do with the baby."
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters.
This one
across the
will be
board.
interesting because for Vice President Harris, when you consider her personal brand and her experience with this, it has been a little bit tough. Let's see what she says.
This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you
VP
tonight
Harris's
is, why did the
earrings,
administration wait until 6 months before the election to
her
act?
shirt,
And would you have done anything differently? if
shirt
President
giving
Biden was-
Chloe,
So I'm the
which is
only
now
person
back
on
for the
this
fall.
stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings.
So the difference, bringing up the experience here, that is unique. Unique value proposition, y'all.
Came up with a border security bill, which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime, trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking. in
So she's
drugs and
stating
things. But you know
what
happened?
she had
Donald
planned
Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress,
and
said,
lifting
you know why?
him as the stall, as the
Instead of
person
fixing
who caused the
a
problem.
And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised.
So
I'm gonna actually
what
do
she's
something
doing is
really unusual,
interesting
and I'm
here.
gonna invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the
Where are we
course of
going?
his
Where are we
rallies,
going?
He talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
That was shrewd, very smart, off-brand, but a smart choice made.
Successfully so, that would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the board.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that
By
do
lifting
go,
up his rallies, which is a pain point for him, you can see the joy and delight in her
She
face.
can't talk about
Look,
that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most
very smart
That's because
choice.
people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years
Now you'll notice she got him to wake up a little bit here, and we're seeing more signature Donald Trump here.
And look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country. And it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again.
Signature, Donald Trump.
This country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there had been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
the people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
The people
I'm
on
taking
television
it from the city
say
manager.
The dog was eaten by the people that went there.
This is signature
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond to the rest of it.
Donald Trump.
Talk about extreme. This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans
So
who have formally worked with President.
what we witnessed just now regarding the dogs was signature Donald Trump, fear stoking to the ultimate level. And
if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him.
she's bringing it back to the point of what's real.
His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the Republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people.
This is
Not so graciously.
signature Donald Trump.
Or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people whose were just
Signature Donald Trump.
violently killed. And I got to know the parents and
I fired the people.
They should have fired all
I fired them. You're fired.
because that was one of the most incompetent
Signature Donald Trump, on brand.
anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper, he was no good, I fired him, so he writes a book. Another one writes a book, because with me they can write books, with nobody else can they? But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy, look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists, they have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any sitting president in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher.
The question was
They allowed criminals,
us about the plan.
millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers to come in.
Tell us about the plan. This is the question. And so we're leaning into fear here, which is signature.
Or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country.
Signature.
This will be one of
Here.
the greatest mistakes in history for them.
Fear,
to allow.
fear,
And
fear.
I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in.
Millions,
All over the
millions,
world.
millions,
Crime is
millions.
down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels.
So
that
going
nobody
back
thought
to
As you
migrants as the villains here,
crime is actually coming down in this country, but Vice
Excuse me,
President
the
Harris,
FBI defrauded. They were defrauding statements.
Uh,
They did
on brand,
the
and
worst
good for
things.
David
They
for
didn't
correcting in that
cities
moment.
with the worst crime. It was a fraud. Just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich, coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic
Smart and on
crimes,
brand.
election interference, has been found liable.
The reminder of who
assault, and his
Donald
next
Trump
big
is,
court appearance is in
is
criminal sentencing. And let's
very
face
much
where
like
each
Kamala
person stands
Harris,
on
signature
the issue,
VP
what's
Harris.
important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this.
So the next chapter, leaving the rhetoric behind. She set the table at the very top for what we could expect, and that knowing that it would live itself out, that it would come to bear, it was perfect setup for, and now we're going ahead. This is what we are going to do.
With the same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris.
She set it up at the top.
Excuse me.
Smart.
Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and
So
win an
here
election.
with the
They've thrown
vigor,
cases.
and we've noticed over the time that we've been together that it is
Justice Department.
coming out
Let's
even
talk about
further.
extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court.
So this is where she's leaning into fear just a hair and putting it on the American people to be the ones to make sure that things shift.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized.
Very much Donald Trump.
A bullet to the head because of the things that they say.
So the
about me.
martyrdom,
They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy.
This is signature
We do have a lot to get to.
Donald Trump.
We have a lot to get to. Linsey?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government.
Let's see how this is handled.
Campaign says you don't.
The being on one side and then switching over is something that people have said about her positioning. We're not talking about that, but how she will handle it.
My values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020.
So connecting to where she currently is a smart choice, and that is signature Kamala Harris there.
Opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign.
Donald Trump's looks here.
Had the largest increase in.
I'm trying to figure out if he is paying attention or if he will soon fall asleep. I don't know. I'm not trying to be funny. I really don't know.
Let me tell you, I grew up a middle class kid raised by a
We're lifting here again the family value and the relatability, which she has over-indexed in over the past month or so.
Is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime.
So we've seen her lead through these values. So she is tying back to what is important to her. Her values, her mission is what she is bringing into the space and reminding people of.
And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your
First of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars. Many
billions.
When people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it.
So this is signature Donald Trump. Everybody's making fun of you. You're the laughing stock.
She was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now. You don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out.
Signature Donald Trump.
Minnesota, and wanted to let criminals
signature Donald Trump there. And she handled it gracefully, which is signature Kamala Harris. The smile, Sure, go ahead.
To do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to
This claim is signature Donald Trump, like very outrageous to the next level.
Fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish one thing, so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling.
So I have the power. I can fix it. I am taking care of it.
The day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead. Fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills and we'll go back to solar, where they need the whole desert to get some energy to come out. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar.
This is signature Donald Trump.
400, 500
I feel like in a minute we're gonna hear "you're fired." So the leaning in here, the rapid fire in speaking.
6 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President,
You can see Kamala Harris's face is pleased with this question.
The world saw what played out of the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home.
It'll be interesting to see how this question is answered.
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David. All over the world, and crime rates are down all over the world.
Signature Donald Trump.
When are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
you. You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold.
Okay, offering recommendation for questions. That's very much Donald Trump. But we did not address the original question about the top of the year last year.
I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others.
So distancing himself, this is signature. We noticed it with his VP pick mention. You notice he distanced him away. He distanced, rather, himself away.
They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond.
No! That was signature David Muir, and that was actually quite funny.
I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day...
So again, we have the, let me take you behind the curtain. I was there. I saw. So I'm going to share this tea with y'all of what it was. And it's very effective tactic.
And some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side.
So the reminder here is signature Kamala Harris. We are getting prosecutor vibes heavy.
So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn.
We're not going back.
And if that was
going ahead, going forward. This is the language that they have been pushing over the past month or so. Come join us. We're together. We're for all. So the inclusion from video one, from commercial one rather, is pulled through here and strengthened even more because they've had a chance to play.
Because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart.
We're not going back. We're moving ahead. We're moving forward.
Not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity.
So here he is naming his colleagues in press and media. That is on brand for him.
It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of the stuff up. I ask you this, you talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing
He's
anything?
returning to
I'd
immigration,
be very proud to do it.
and that is a signature Donald Trump thing to do.
I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her.
That's so ridiculous, so ridiculous as a side.
They have the right to do it. They don't need
Donald
us.
Trump.
They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed, you'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll
Oh.
say, come on down to
The personal bar
if he signs a bill that the border is
is
closed,
signature
what he has
Trump.
to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President.
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
Him, did he just say I said that? Did I say that?
That was said sarcastically.
That is signature Donald
There's so
Trump.
much proof. All you have to do
Is that what I said?
And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically.
The fear mongering.
Get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our
Signature.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisper, we didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them
No judge
Republican,
looked at it.
and said
They
there was
said
no
we didn't have
widespread
standing.
fraud.
That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in
Everything.
election
Signature
doesn't have
Trump,
standing,
the
a
leaning
president
in
of the United
here,
States
the
doesn't have
looming.
standing? That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you. Georgia,
Not producing a special. Signature Donald Trump.
We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have
Fear.
gone into decline.
Fear. It's
We
going
have
to
a
the
nation
trash. It's
that is
terrible.
dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris.
The use of
there tonight,
David
said
at
he
the
didn't
end
say
adds
so
strength
he
to
still,
what he was saying.
He did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very
The way she
difficult time
started.
processing. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts
Very, very strong start there.
end the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused
Note here.
about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve
Very,
better.
very much on brand for her.
Let me just tell you about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was
So this, you know, these are my homeboys,
afraid. Look at what's going on, by the way.
is what he is lifting here.
I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline.
I have the connections. I have the gravitas. I have the swag, the sway, in order to work with these international leaders. She does not.
Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million.
Okay, that is signature Donald Trump, and that is interesting. How does he know that he hates her? Like, does he gossip with
And now
Joe Biden? Like,
I
what?
don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
Your time
I
is up.
think we're
Thank
going to
you.
do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now
Yes.
to the Israel-Hamas
Okay.
and the hostages who are still being held.
So this is going to be very interesting. Let's see how they both address.
Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians.
So he'll likely lead into
If I were
personal
president,
relationships.
it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever. I know Putin very well. He would have never, and there was no threat of.
There we have it.
For 40
On
years.
brand for him. I have the connections. I have the
Millions of
sway.
people, when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that
This is all on brand. The sorority party, the diminishing.
I've been pretty good at predictions, and I won't talk about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel.
Leaning into fear on both sides, actually. On brand for him.
Under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror.
Spheres of terror.
They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's on brand there. He'd get it done before he started presidency. I don't know how that would be possible, but that's on brand. For him, saying that is on brand.
From the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself.
So she is leaning into this and the poking him and using what he said against him, which is on brand for her as a prosecutor.
It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un, and it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery and favors.
This is strong.
That is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me.
If there was a snatching of a wig, this is
why we understand
it.
We have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on
Vice
national
President
security,
Harris.
including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that
On
they're
brand.
weak and incompetent, and they are.
I talk to
They're
these
grossly
people.
incompetent.
They know
I
that
just asked them a question.
we're not doing a
Why
good
does
job,
Biden
but
go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe, because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way, gets
President
paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
interesting. So this first component, quite strong. Look at the glare. They didn't show Harris. Very strong, very strong, very strong. I cannot wait to share my thoughts at the end.
It was a regular day for 19-year-old Melissa Witt.
She went to meet her mom at a bowling church league. But
approaching the gate militants came in from.
Hi. Ismail? David.
ABC's World News Tonight with David Muir is America's most watched newscast. You're watching America's #1 streaming news. Keep streaming with ABC News Live. Live from the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
This is moving quickly, y'all.
David Muir and Linsey Davis.
It's kind of crazy.
Welcome back to this historic ABC News presidential debate tonight. We're going to continue here, and I want to turn to the war in Ukraine. We're now 2.5 years into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more, because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to get
The millions and millions point being brought here.
For $150 billion.
Billions and millions and billions.
And you don't have the courage to ask Europe, like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said.
So I know
either you pay
I am the one
protect you anymore. So that's maybe
that is
one
on
of the
brand
reasons
for
they
him.
don't like me as much as they like weak people, but. You take a look at what's happening.
The laugh of her on brand.
They're into 100 to 100.
As commander-in-chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president, you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason
That
that
was
Donald Trump
signature
says
Kamala
that this
Harris.
war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here.
So all of the
I
videos
actually
we've seen
met
in the
with
past
Zelensky a few days
of
before
her
Russia
kind of
invaded, tried through force
that
to
was
change
just what we saw.
territorial
You're
boundaries,
running
to
against
define one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow much happier than he is right now. But eventually, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got
So the
nuclear
look on her
weapons. They don't
face
have to
is
talk about
signature
that. He's got
Kamala
nuclear
Harris. If you
weapons.
look at
Nobody
any
ever thinks
of
about
the previous
And eventually,
videos,
maybe he'll use it. Maybe
debates,
he hasn't
whatever,
been that threatening.
this
He does
look
have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody
here,
likes to talk about it.
is that so?
But just so you understand, they
Indeed,
sent her to
interesting.
negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he
And
went
the
in
eat you
and he
for
started the
lunch was
war
the other
because
quote.
everything they said was weak and
And
stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should
he
have
didn't
never
fall for it,
started. She was the
which is
emissary.
off-brand.
They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky, and she did. And the war started 3 days
Even
later.
I was
And
surprised by
that's the
that.
kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fella. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times.
Off-brand, vintage,
The
on
reality
brand,
is, it
with
has been
that fact
about
checking in
standing
real
as
time.
America always should,
David knew that
as
she
a
has never met
leader,
him,
upholding international
but he used it
rules
as
and
an
norms,
opportunity
as a
to
leader
ask a
who shows
question of
strength, understanding
Harris.
that the alliances we have around
It
the
was
world
a
are
very smart
dependent on our ability
tag
to
in.
look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander in chief, and the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit, personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Mark said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen, he's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen, for years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both
So
on
you see
trade
here in
and on.
the
I got
and
them
the
to pay up
cadence
by
and
saying
the
one of the
I
statements you
did
made before.
and all
If
of
you
that,
don't,
it
we're not going to protect you.
establishes
Otherwise, we
the
would have never got.
authority.
He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this. And the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them
So that breath there.
to
This
Camp David
you
because he
fill in the
does
blank.
not, again, appreciate
Former
the
president.
role and
That was
responsibility
strategic.
of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
The
President Trump, your
looking
response to
over.
her saying, began the
Looking
negotiations
Yeah, thank
with
you.
the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, they deal with the wrong people all the time. I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban.
So,
And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we're getting out. We would have been out faster than that, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind. That we wouldn't have left. We wouldn't have left $80 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish,
pictures of their house,
blew it. The agreement said you have to do
that
this,
type of
this,
thing.
this,
It is making
this,
him
and they didn't do it.
relatable
do
to
it.
his
The
base even more
agreement
so.
was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move
And
on.
these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you.
Her boss,
I want to move on now
signature
to
Donald
recent
Trump.
politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn
This will
black,
be
and
interesting.
now she wants to be known as black.
VP Harris
I
has
want to ask a bigger
been
picture question here tonight.
avoiding.
Why do you believe
this.
it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your
Let's see
opponent?
the
I
answer
don't,
here.
and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
For your words. I'm
I don't
asking,
know. I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was.
This is signature
Not
Donald
black.
Trump. I don't know what
She
happened.
put
I
out.
don't say it. I'm not
And
sure. It doesn't matter.
I'll
It's
say
not a
that.
big deal.
And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's
Like-
up to.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
That was not
I
signature.
think
And
I
smart
mean,
of him.
honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people.
Mm,
Do
This was
believe that the
smart
vast majority of us
on
know
her
that we have
behalf.
so much more in common than what separates us, and we want
and not
this
signature
kind of
her
approach
overall,
that is just
overall,
constantly trying to
but
divide us, and
signature
especially by race. And
to
let's remember
her
how Donald
during
Trump
this
started. He
campaign.
was land. He owned land. He owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent
Rude.
property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for the execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American people
So notice that she
better than
brought in those
are better than
instances,
this.
and now she's coming
Want
back
someone
to
who understands
everybody
as I
being
do, I
together,
travel our country.
the country being
We see
divided.
in
That's
each
not what we
other-
need. That's not what we need.
We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people, knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all
This
have the
is
same
off
dreams and
brand
aspirations and
for
want a
her,
president
but
who
on
invests in
brand for how
those,
she has
not
been
in
running
hate
this
and
campaign.
division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Linsey?
President Trump, this is now your third time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country. And they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5. They admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman. She says, she is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad. And she can't get away with that.
Briefly, clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump.
The attempt
And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country. One who believes in what is possible. One who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of all
the separation of branding, thinking.
I believe in what we can do to
from Joe
strengthen our
Biden
small businesses, which is why
or
I
leaning
have a plan. Let's
into
talk about our plans.
the American
And let's
people,
compare the plans.
as
I
who
have a
she
plan
has commonality
to
with,
give
is
startup
shrewd,
businesses
smart.
$50,000 tax deduction to pursue
In
their
this moment,
ambitions, their
bringing in
innovation,
the
their
plan of what
ideas,
she
their hard
will
work.
do
I have a plan,
and sticking to that.
$6,000 for young
We
families
have
for the
not
first
gotten
year of
that
your child's
yet from
to
the
help
other
you in
side,
that
or
most
at
critical
least not
stage of your
to
child's
this.
development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream, offering help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation I believe, David, people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page.
Vice President Harris.
Let's turn to
President
let's turn
Trump,
back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump.
And she was
Let's turn to
strategic.
policy,
Please
please.
don't
To
think that
defund
she
the police.
didn't know that she
has a
was
plan to
running down that
confiscate
clock.
everybody's gun.
President Trump,
She has
you
a
have
plan
to.
She
to
was
stop
strategic.
in Pennsylvania or
She
anywhere
timed that
else.
perfectly.
That's what her plan is until June.
Lindsey, go ahead.
President
No,
Trump,
No, the
President
former
Trump.
president has said
No, I'm
something
sorry.
twice to
Well,
respond to.
I'm sorry.
I
We're
just
going
need
to
to
move on,
respond
Vice
one
President
time
Harris.
to what he has
President
said.
Trump, this is now
Go
your
ahead.
third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan? And can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up, they wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be? Never going to be great. Or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an
That
obligation, even though
choice of
politically it
words
would have been
is
good to just
signature,
let it
one
rot
brand
and let it go
for
away.
former President
I
Trump.
decided, and I told my people,
Let
the
it rot.
top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in this
Very good
administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing, but it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan.
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something
I'm
that's
not
better
laughing.
and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have.
I'm not
to
laughing.
do
I am
that.
thinking about
And
the
you'll be hearing
contrast
about it in the
between
not too distant future.
I'm not
Vice
president
President
yet
Harris,
and
in
I'll be able to stop the
2017, you
war,
supported Bernie Sanders'
and just
proposal to do
now
away
I'm
with
not
private
president
insurance
yet,
and create a government-run healthcare system.
so I don't have a
2 years
plan.
later, you proposed a plan that
They're
included private
contradictory,
insurance option.
and that is
What is
on
your
brand.
plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private healthcare options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Linsey. I just need to respond to the previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning
Again,
hours
going to the
when
inside
it was up
baseball.
for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being you don't like him, you said at the time, because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night. Walked
That is
onto the
signature
Senate
Donald
floor
Trump. We
and
all know it
said,
well.
no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act,
So
not get rid of
wise
it.
use of time.
That's just
President
prologue
Harris,
in
thank
terms
you.
of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue
Please.
that's important for a
She
lot
made a
of
mistake.
Everything.
And number one, John
that short
McCain
amount of
fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We could do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to give.
President
People
Trump.
are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs
So the
while I have been
advantage
vice
here
president. We have
is that
invested in clean
she
energy
is
to the
in
point
the
that we are
current
opening up
administration.
factories
And
around
so
the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create
she
manufacturing
is
jobs.
leaning
He
into
lost
that. Like she
manufacturing
has
jobs.
hot tea. She
And
has
I'm also
piping
proud
hot
to
tea.
have the
This
endorsement
is
of the
what's
United
happening
Auto
now.
Workers
This
and
is
Sean
what's
Fay,
now.
who also know part of building a clean energy economy includes
He does not
investing
have that
in
advantage.
American-made products, American
The into the plan
includes
forward
growing
would help
what we
bring
can
him.
do around
and-
American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
It didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. They're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers, whether it's in Detroit, South Carolina, or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
The
Thank
look
you.
of
We'll be right back
exhaustion.
with closing statements from both of our
uh,
candidates. An
on
historic
Kamala
night, this
Harris
ABC
that-
News presidential debate in Philadelphia.
Live from the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Here again, David Muir and Linsey Davis.
Welcome back tonight. The time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris.
So I think you've heard tonight two different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward.
The
we're not
look
going
so the glaring.
And I do believe that the
We're
American
not
people,
going back.
we all have so much more in common
Hold
than what
that through.
separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the
Leaning
aspirations, the
into, I have
dreams,
a plan.
the hopes, the ambition of the
He does
American
not.
people, which is why I intend to
Hopes,
create
dreams, the
an
American
opportunity
dream.
economy, investing in
leaning into
small
this.
businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world.
All of her
I
statements
will
have
be a president that will
pull-through.
protect our fundamental rights and freedoms,
Everything, like she's
including the right of a woman to
transitioning
make decisions about her own body
nicely,
and not have her government
tying
tell
in
her what to do.
everything
I'll tell
together.
you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was the
Now
DA,
she's
I
going
was an
into
attorney
the
general,
relatability,
a United States
the
Senator, and now vice
authenticity.
president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever
I'm
asked,
bringing everyone
are
together.
you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump.
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why
So
hasn't she done it? She's been there for three
it
and a half
started off
years.
with the
They've
focus
had
on the
3.5
opponent.
years to fix the
That's an
border.
interesting
They've
choice.
had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people
So
don't
this
believe in.
here is an
You
interesting
believe in
choice
things like
that
we're not
he
going to
is
frack,
making.
we're not going to take fossil fuel, we're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong,
It-
whether you like it or not.
Interesting,
Germany tried
because
that,
the focus
and
is not
within
on
1 year, they were
himself.
to building
the focus is
normal
on the
energy
opponent.
plants.
And
We're
in
not ready for it.
closing,
We can't
this is valuable
sacrifice our
time to
country
land a
for the
point
sake of big
when
vision.
you're
But I
at
just
the
ask one
end
simple question.
about what you
Didn't
can
she
do.
do it? We're a
And
failing nation.
throughout,
We're a nation that's
that
in
didn't
serious
happen.
decline. We're
And
being
so
laughed at
this
all over the world.
is an
All over the
interesting
world, they're
choice that
laughed. I
he
know the
has
leaders
made,
very
because
well.
it
They're
could have
coming
used the
to see
time to
me.
drive his
They
final
call
point.
me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on in Russia and
Fear.
Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Linsey Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all
Well
over the
done.
world.
Well
And from all of
done
us
on
at
behalf
ABC
of
News.
Linsey and David. What a time. What a time. I know you're like, how many pages does she actually have in that notebook? She's been using it all summer, and now we're endless. Listen, let's go over this really quickly. Overall, it was spirited. It was everything that the previous presidential debate was not. Shout out to Linsey Davis and David Muir for correcting the entire time. They did what needed to be done, and they looked amazing to boot. What I have here for Harris, there were lots of smiles. She was relatable. She talked about ending division. There was also this poking, and I had anticipated that she would do this because Donald Trump, part of his brand is being stirred up easily and having a skin that is a little bit thinner than most. And she is the perfect opponent to get a rise out of him. Poking was ever present, and he took the bait almost each and every time. She leaned into giving secrets. She leaned into, let me give you a peek under the hood here. Let me tell you about what was really going on. And that was an advantage that actually makes her more relatable. It is like, hey, come here, let me tell you something. And it helps her to present more authentically. It was a strong move. Donald Trump stuck to the facts as he knows them. He doubled down. He would not be moved. We shall not be moved. He was not moved. There was the scowling. We noticed that as time went by, there was this heightened cadence where he was more subdued in the beginning. And all I kept thinking was, wow, for an 80-year-old person who supposedly doesn't sleep much, he has vigor, way more than I do at this point. And you'll note that it is that vigor, that energy, the body language, the pointedness. Even if what is being said is not factual, it reads as such because of the way that it is being presented. And that is something to note. And I have to kind of tip my glasses on that, because if you can do that, then you are the ultimate in being convincing. Even if you are the only one that initially believes, eventually what will happen is people will follow because you are so confident in how you present. That's an advantage. Shout out to the moderators, to David and Linsey. I think they did a phenomenal job of fact checking. I'm seeing some early reports online. I had to get the heck off of social, where some people were like, they shouldn't have allowed space for mistruths to be told, or do a better job moderating. First of all, I want to see you moderate on a major broadcast network across the globe, and then you can talk to me. They knew what they would be working with in both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, and they did a fantastic job of moderating. Top tier. And aside from that, the outfits, y'all, the outfits. So you see, I am dressed. We have our debate outfit on, and I did that in honor of everyone that appeared tonight. I loved what Linsey Davis was wearing, the gray on gray. I loved what David Muir was wearing. He had the navy blue and light blue, the thin tie. I loved what Kamala Harris was wearing. She had the pearls on as well. She had on the white shirt. Very signature Chloe. As I mentioned, Chloe is actually one of the brands to do it this fall, and it was giving me Chloe. And she had on her suit, which was unassuming but well tailored, and of course the tried and true kitten heel. Now I don't shade a kitten heel. We throw on a kitten heel, okay? And if your pants are long enough, no one will see that it's a kitten heel. That's a secret that I just shared on this debate night. On the other side, we had Donald Trump in his signature navy oversized blazer. Oversized blazers are in. And his red tie, which unlike David's was a little flared out, not as slim, it was vintage looking. His whole vibe was vintage, giving 80s, 89, 88. Ain't nothing wrong with that. Something's wrong with that. Anywho, y'all, thank you so much for joining me. I had a ball on this evening that is historic with you all. Stay tuned for more as we continue to discuss all things personal, brand, and marketing. I got you. I'm here for you. Choose me. Vote for me. Thank you again for joining. And until next time, you are capable of big things.